Alright, here we are with Ravenloft Reincarnated, a Savage Worlds Ravenloft game. The Conspiracy at Krezk. The introduction episode. There's a bunch of semicolons, listeners. So, it is January 2018. I am Devin, I think it's still storyteller. And to my left, we have X playing Y.
Nicole playing Annika Oxinger, who is a old lady whose family runs a local inn/tavern.
And Tyler playing Phineas Grosfellow, human inventor and tinkerer and entrepreneur.
Kevin playing Asher, who is a drunken half-elf.
And Peter as Jack Angus, the field medic from World War I.
Perfect. We'll get into these characters a little bit more later, listeners. Let's do a bit of a crash course in what exactly you're listening to. So, system. We're running in Savage Worlds. Savage Worlds is a pulp adventure system that's pretty good at being a pulp punchy adventure system. It's different from D&D. It's a little more. It's lighter on the combat mechanics, but a bit more abstract. We actually haven't played it before, so I don't have much of an opinion for you, listeners. This is our first intro to it. Second half. It's in Ravenloft. Ravenloft is a old D&D setting. It was popular in AD&D. It came out with the first module. What's it called? Castle Ravenloft or something?
Hotel Griffin, no.
No, that's a sequel. We didn't prepare at all for this. There was a module that was about a castle called Castle Ravenloft, listeners. And you fought a vampire named Strahd, and you probably didn't kill him. He probably killed your party, and he was much more interesting than your characters. This spawned a lot of interest in the gothic horror genre and the type of characters and villains you can make from that genre. And eventually, by the time AD&D rolled around, all the disparate modules that were made were turned into a campaign setting called Ravenloft, the Demiplades of Dread, or the Lands of Mist. Ravenloft's most successful printing run happened in the early days of 3rd edition, where White Wolf, with their Sword and Sorcery imprint, did 3rd edition updates to all the lore and campaign material for Ravenloft. So they changed up the map, they streamlined the cores, they advanced the settings timeline, and they made it much more of a sandbox type game. So the briefest breakdown of Ravenloft, because we don't want to get into a lot of it, goes like this. There's a place called the Lands of Mist. It's a core continent that is bordered by weird fog at all times and oceans, and it has a bunch of different nations in it that are connected by land borders, but they're all confusingly different. One will be French Renaissance, one will be a standard D&D Dark World, one will be basically Transylvania, one will be New Orleans, one will be prehistoric Earth with crocodiles that are intelligent. The reason for this is the Lands of Mist are a sort of cage or prison where unknowable powers take villainous people who fit the gothic protagonist, antagonist persona, and put them in this place and give them their own nation, and in bizarre, fetishy ways, punish them for being shitty. The most famous example is Strahd von Zarovich the Vampire and his nation of Barovia. Strahd von Zarovich was a soldier and a war hero for his not Transylvania people. He conquered Barovia and ruled it and became old and saggy and out of his prime. His younger brother, who was handsome and better than him, married a hot woman, and Strahd coveted the crap out of her to the point where on their wedding night, he murdered his brother in a pact with a devil and then tried to seduce his wife. Then his guards realized that he was murdering his brother and murdered him, and he became a vampire, accidentally pushed the wife over the edge of the wall, or she jumped, it's up to debate, and she fell into a misty patch, and all of a sudden the entire land he had conquered of Barovia went somewhere else. And now Strahd's a vampire who lives in Barovia, and people can't leave, and the land's under his control because he is the land. And his ironic punishment is every generation, a woman is born who's basically supposed to be the reincarnation of the woman he loved, Tanya. And any time he tries to get her, an elaborate Rube Goldberg series of events plays out that causes her to die literally a second before she'd accept him as his eternal lover and he'd be happy. And this happens constantly. Every generation, he goes through this elaborate play where he almost gets everything he wants and it's stolen from him, and he gets mad, really mad. Probably mad at the adventurers that foiled his true love. They do not come out of this smelling like roses. And that's basically a glimpse into the mind of it. The entire world that Strahd lives in is built to torture him and trick him and keep his attention occupied and make him think everything's fine and he's in control, right up until it pulls the rug out from under him and makes him miserable. But that's horrific because the people who live in his domain are real fucking people. They live real lives, they have real wants and desires and hopes, and they don't know they're part of an elaborate Saw-type scenario on a meta scale, where it's all a prison to torture one guy. Every country in Ravenloft, to an extent, is like this. It's all about tragic irony and tragic characters. You got the dude who made Frankenstein's monster, you got Bluebeard, you have all these people, Dorian Gray, the Invisible Man, all these assholes. Live in Ravenloft and think they're in power and think they're clever and think they're in charge and play games of torturing people for their own goals, and then they get kicked in the junk. Forever. That is a very crude breakdown of Ravenloft, but that's kind of what the setting is like. Ravenloft is defined by its interesting antagonists and how the players contrast their characters against those antagonists. How much are you like Strahd? Because Strahd's not a bad guy because he's a vampire. Strahd's a bad guy because he's a fratricidal dickbag who tried to take some woman who didn't love him because he decided he wanted her. Being a vampire is just icing on the cake. So your characters are sort of... The problem with Ravenloft is your characters can always be that person if they go a little bit too far on the obsessive side. They can always get, a little too, they can always want something a little too much or cross the line a few too many times. And when you do that, the things that run or live or are Ravenloft take notice. Some people say it's the mists. Some people say it's a different entity that kind of watches from above. But it'll notice you if you're being shitty in the same way the Dark Lords are shitty. And it's very explicit on this, it'll reward you for it. But the reward you get isn't the reward you probably want. It's very much a Stephen King ironic punishment sort of affair. So yeah, that is the setting. The pretense for this game is we have a bunch of people here, and we all wanted to play characters that were in a town in Barovia that would bounce off each other and the sort of horror stories and tropes in the game and, make an adventure out of it. Stay in one place, don't try to travel around all of Ravenloft to solve all the problems like an adventuring party, but see what kind of drama you could build up from kind of the soap opera pretense of you're in one place and you all know each other. Yeah, I think that covers the basics. Should we go over to characters next?
I suppose, yeah.
All right. Who would like to go first?
Oh, well, you go ahead.
Okay, I guess I'll start with my character, Jack Angus. He's from the real world, because in Ravenloft, you can go to Mist from anywhere and end up in Ravenloft. So I figured, hey, why not have a person that knows the tropes and knows that they are tropes, basically. So yeah, I figured he'd be from, around World War I area. He's from Australia. He was a medical student, got drafted, got in the war, in the Europe for, the great Kingdom of Britain and all that.
The Great War. The war to end all wars.
Yeah, the war. And yeah, I'm figuring that, where he was, got gassed at one point because, hey, gas warfare, that's so much fun in World War I.
Oh, you got the real horror of the Great War, the introduction of chemical warfare.
Yeah, and that was the mist that took him to Ravenloft.
Oh my Christ, that's dark. You're in a fucking coma. You're like that soldier from the Bell Jar and the Butterfly who has all his limbs and eyes and ears destroyed, so he only talks by Morse coding his stumps out to his nurse.
Oh, Christ.
Having vivid hallucinations.
What the fuck is that movie called? Jacob's Ladder?
Yeah, good lord. That's... wow.
So he ended up here about a decade ago, and, he's been living here. He's, got the remnants of his, military equipment, and he decided, hey, I know how to heal people, I'll, be useful here. And he became the, town doctor, basically, with his modern sort of knowledge of medicine and, how to treat people and, this sort of things. Not everything translates exactly, but, with some scientific knowledge, you can start applying that and trying to figure out how to actually cure people here, because, oh my god, this place needs some. And yeah, that's generally his thing. He's the healer type.
Yeah, for reference listeners, that's exactly how Ravenloft works. You originally, when it was like a very bare bones campaign setting, the pretense was you were probably adventurers in, I'm going to say Faerun, Greyhawk, or Mystera, the original AD&D settings. And, ooh, the mist swallowed you up. And, oh, there's Castle Ravenloft. Do the module. And, oh, no, the mist took you back to your place. You escaped. That was the setup for the original Ravenloft loops. Before it became a fleshed out campaign setting where the pretense was you're born in the Demi Plains of Dread and you die there. Yep. So people being imported is basically how 50% of most of the NPCs in Ravenloft even got here.
Yep.
Who's next?
I'll go next. So, Asher is this half-elf drunk, as I mentioned before. He lives around town. He does basic labor. He was basically brought into town by his mother, who was this elven woman. She stumbled into town and promptly died after giving birth. And most of his, origins and whatnot are a mystery. He basically spends a lot of his time just doing odd jobs for people around town, protecting their sheep, going to the forest, doing grunt work that no one else really wants to do or isn't brave enough to do. Yeah, there isn't much else to him.
Well, your character's half-elf, and it bears pointing out for that, for context. Ravenloft is a very much isolationist and fear of the other setting. So people who aren't the norm are almost naturally shunned by everyone. Your character being half-elven means you're not human, and 97% of everyone in Barovia is human. So just instinctually, for no good reason, your character's shunned.
Oh, yes.
Or the other.
Because elves are this unknowable, immortal thing that just, exist out there. They're strange and mystical.
Yeah, Ravenloft does a really good job of reflavoring the various D&D races that got included to be a little more compelling. Like, elves are nihilistic partiers.
Kinda.
Yeah. A little. It's not really important.
No.
All right.
I'll go.
All right, just talk up to the mic.
Sure.
Also, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but this is Tyler. Tyler is now part of the group.
Hello, Tyler.
I just made a gesture, but I guess that doesn't get to.
Yeah, you'll be doing a lot of hand gestures to the mic.
So I'm
Mostly
playing
yes.
Phineas Grossfellow, who is a human inventor. He's an optimist in a dark place. He was born in Barovia, and he attempts to improve his lot and the lot of others around him through science, especially through weird science. So he tinkers around with a lot of gadgets and clockwork devices, and tries to invent his way out of most situations.
Yeah, so that's one of the Savage World things. You're gonna be a weird scientist.
Yeah, you can basically have a niche that you can be an inventor. Like there's not a lot to really go on that. It's nice.
Yep. Largely flavor for a lot of the specifics of it.
It's a pretty cool problem-solving tool. It makes you a gadgeteer, basically. But it's more grounded than, say, I don't know, Exalted's craft system for being a gadgeteer, where your gadgeteering is, I built an aqueduct overnight. It's made of gold.
At least it's not lead.
Child bones.
Child skulls.
I am Nicole. I'm playing Annika Oxinger. I'm also a native of Barovia. My family's been in whatever the town is going to be called for many generations at this point.
Krezk.
Oh yeah,
Krezk.
I forgot.
It's
I
an
forgot
actual
to say it.
place, the actual setting.
Yeah.
So my family's been in this town for generations, although, my character's very old at this point. She's a grandmother, so all the older generation of her family are gone. She has children now. She and her brothers started the local inn or tavern, /tavern rather. Her son now runs it, and she's kind of retired, but, she still has her nose in everyone's business. She, as a side note, has weird cat-like eyes that kind of also sets her apart from people, and most of the women in her family also inherited it. Strange note, that means she can talk to cats.
Kitty cats.
And also see in the dark. And also she can see ghosts, but that's unrelated.
It's an unrelated power.
Unrelated eye-based power. She can also see and talk to ghosts. And has since she saw her dad get murdered when she was young.
Dun, dun, dun.
Ta-da!
Plot point.
I don't know what else to say. She's old.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
So, listeners, what we did for this game was we did two things. One, I ripped out the debt system from the Powered by the Apocalypse game Urban Shadows, and we went round table and picked an archetype each and applied it to the characters and then traded debts. And that accomplished setting up all the players to know each other's characters in a very connected and structured way. So out the gate, all the characters are very invested in each other. I don't know how much detail we really want to go into that, because I think it would amount to us just reading off the sheets.
Yeah, basically.
That
They
seems
haven't fleshed
dull.
that
Pretty
out
much. One person's helping another person, like I don't know, medically or getting stuff for that person. That's
We'll probably
Not
link a
dumb.
public doc and you can check up on it and be like, oh, that's neat, and then not use it.
I mean, it's going to come up in game anyway,
Yeah.
so.
Basically, all the characters owe or are owed debts from all the other characters, but not in a... It's asymmetrical. So it's not a nice, happy medium circle. Some people only owe a lot to one person, but some people owe to other people, and it chains itself in a way that everyone can work together and call in favors on each other.
Yep.
The other thing we did is... Do you know the name of the cards,
the
Peter?
backstory cards.
Yeah, Peter picked up backstory cards from Drive-Thru.
Yep, from drive-thru.
And it's a neat little card print you can get that lets you create incidents and backstory for your game before the game starts that ties the characters to each other a little more, ties them to the setting more, and generates important plot points. And out of random, out of thin air, when we did 2 rounds of it, we created a fairly compelling and almost mundane inciting incident for this game, which is there is a mine in Krezk that a merchant company wants to have sole control of and is doing weird stuff in the mine that various characters know about, and one of the characters is an inheritor to the mine and full rights to it. Another one wants it for, working on gear and stuff. Another one is obsessed with the character that owns it. Like, it's this whole thing that just basically makes the game go from session 1, which we haven't recorded yet.
Yep.
So we recommend that. I'm sure we'll include a link to those things somewhere.
Yep.
Anything else? Anything else people want to...
Okay, I mean, the backstory card did flesh that out because through sheer randomness, a couple things converge on the same location, basically. But there were a couple plot points there that are not connected. Like, there was some incident in the woods that only 2 characters are involved with. Or something like that, so...
Little branch-offs
Yeah.
that we can expand upon and we'll get their own...
Mm-hmm.
Get their own kind of time.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was kind of neat. We basically built ourselves a nice solid myth arc in the middle around the mine with branching off, episodes of the week for the things like the fairy issue that Kevin and Peter generated, and the serial killing thing that we generated for Tyler and Nicole. It's all over the place.
Yep.
To be clear, neither of us is the serial killer.
No one here is a serial killer. Except, I don't know, Peter, if you consider war as serial killing, but that's a whole other thing. Respect the troops. Anyway, the last thing to talk about is the version of Ravenloft we're using. So I had a lot of the books from the Sword and Sorcery imprint, but I don't have them on hand anymore because books are hard to move around places. So off the top of my head, I looked up if someone did a conversion of Ravenloft to Savage Worlds. And wouldn't you know it, there's a site called the Fraternity of Shadows, and they've been the Ravenloft fan community for decades now. Decades. And they've always been putting together cool fiction, doing contests, throwing together like interesting stuff, and collating information from the various books over the years. And someone on there put together Ravenloft Reincarnated, which is a full 270-page, full of art, formatted properly, structured PDF that is a full Ravenloft campaign setting. And it's very well put together. And Fraternity of Shadows hosts it. We'll probably include a link to the Fraternity of Shadows page just so you can take a look. And yeah, it's great. It breaks down all the different Ravenloft domains by a brief overview of them and the themes and literature they're inspired from to make it more accessible to people who are new to the setting. It also covers things that weren't originally covered in the setting, like one of the examples we have to bring up, because we came up when we were talking about Ravenloft for the Godbound game, is there are people in Ravenloft called Vistani, which are magical, traveling wanderers that were super heavily based off of stereotypes of Romani people and had a lot of unfortunate bullshit tied to it. And the Savage Worlds book gives you ways to keep them and cutting all the horrible baggage away from them, and a bunch of other stuff too. It's an excellent little guide, like storyteller's guide to navigating Ravenloft without having to go through all the old books. Even though the old books are excellent, the sword and sorcery stuff is really good. But yeah, Fraternity of Shadows, check out their site. You'll see the conversion there. Great little community. And I think that's everything for an intro.
Yeah.
Yep.
Sounds good.
Goals for this game were to keep it low to the ground, like visceral gothic horror, personal stuff, fears, themes of isolation, themes of man against man, the idea that you can't really leave Barovia, not because it's magic, but because where would you go? It's this big mountainous place covered in nothing and monsters, but not really monsters, wolves, but they're werewolves. But they're wolves. Werewolves don't exist, which is horrific. Werewolves and vampires don't exist as far as people are concerned. It's a very ignorant place because people hide the supernatural from each other for sanity's sake. Yeah, so this whole season that we have planned out is just kind of taking a look at that, seeing what Ravenloft looks like, using a system that wasn't originally made for it, and just trying to see what the setting can bring forward for us. I don't think I have anything else.
That's it.
All right. Short intro, right? Short? Yeah. So, I'm Devin,
Nicole.
Tyler?
Kevin?
And Peter.
and this is sponsored by Nobody, signing off.